yourself. We get ready to start. Sorry for the inconvenience. Hotep family, my name is Brother Ray Ray. Welcome to the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr.'s History Club. We meet here every other Wednesday. Every other Wednesday a month in honor of Professor William Mackey Jr., Amos Wilson, Luis Reyes Rivera, El Haj Malik, El Shabazz, Malcolm X, Gil Noble, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Ivan Van Sertima, Brother Harold, Sister Leola Maddox. Because our aim is to bring information to the community. Because these people suffered a lot. They gave up a lot, and they didn't have to. They could have went the other way. Tenure, colleges, and just went on and had good life. So we never want to leave their names on. Because these people gave up a lot. So we meet here. Because one thing about Sister Leola Maddox and her greatness, she had an old car. And she worked in Paterson, New Jersey. And she believed, coming from Paterson, New Jersey, she would drive that old car to the United African Movement. Because she believed in bringing people together. So our Zoom audience, thank you for coming. And our people that's at 103 Quincy Street, please give yourself a big hand. Thank you for coming out and supporting the William Mackey Jr. History Club. We meet here because it's about information. Now, right quick, I'm going to give some community events, and if you got a pen, you can write this down. Tomorrow, Thursday, on Thorough Black Talk, that's our sister Keisha, Tad, Ashe, and Brother Blacksmith. Live, Facebook Live, comes on 8 o'clock. They meet every Thursday. But, Brother Raji, can you bring the camcorder over to the books? We have these books in honor of Sabaku and the great Amos Wilson. Blueprint for Black Power. African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order. This is the Help Survivor in African World Info Systems. Amos's last book that Sabaku put together, The Psychology of Self-Hatred and Self-Defeat Toward a Reclamation of the African Mind. We also have Amos's Great, The Falsification of African Consciousness. We have Awakening the Natural Genius of the Black Child. We have Este Damiana, Distorted Truths and the Bastardization of African Cosmetology. Amos's Classic, Black on Black Violence. You hear a lot of people talking about black on black violence. Oh, we have to do something about this nonsense. Why is this happening? And you never hear anybody mention Amos's Classic, Black on Black Violence. So we have this, and then we have in honor of Luis Ray Rivera, who used to come down here when Professor Mackey left us and speak for hours. In honor of Luis Ray, we have Jazz and Jay. And don't forget, African World Info Systems, and you can get them here at the Mackey's Group. African-centered consciousness versus the New World Order, Garveyism and the Age of Globalism. And you hear a lot of things about the New World Order. You hear it all over the place. This book has been out for a while. You'll be able to spot the forces a mile away. As soon as they open up their mouth, you will know they're full. If we read Amos's Classic. So we have that. Tim Wise, White Like Me, Reflections on Race from the Privileged Son. In honor, also, Charles Hamilton Houston and the Struggle for Civil Rights. Excellent read. In honor of Dr. Ben. Not a computer in sight when he did this. Black man of the Nile and his family. This is in honor of Dr. Ben. Carol Alexander, The Unspoken Truth of Our Racial Divide, White Rage. Theodore Allen, The Invention origin of the white race, the origin of racial oppression in Anglo-American. Edwin Black, the transfer agreement. The untold story of the secret pact between the Third Reich and Jewish Palestine. Our brother, Dr. Randy Short. Slavery, mastery, the impact of religious slavery revealed. And, let me see that, let me bring that book over here again. We have Dr. Scott Whitaker from Atlanta, Georgia. His book, Medicine, MEDISIN, the causes and solutions to the disease and malnutrition and the medical sins that are killing the world. He's out of Atlanta, Georgia, good brother. If any book you're going to read on the scamdemic, pandemic, or whatever, Robert F. Kennedy, the real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the global world on democracy and public health, and Dr. Robert, Joseph McCullough, and Ronnie Cummings. The truth about COVID-19 exposing the Great Reset, lockdown, and vaccine passports are the new normal. Many books you're going to read. If you want some information on that subject, please get these books. So we have these books here to help the Brooklyn Mackey History Club and Amos Wilson and Survival to continue this work. So now, I already mentioned Thorough Black Talk, Keisha Ted, Ashe, and Brother Black Facebook Live. Also family, Saturdays at 10:30, our Philadelphia family, Blog Talk Radio, our Sister Filet, Empress Chi, New Day Resurrection, 10:30 on Saturday. She's still doing the work. PM, sorry. While everybody is shaking and baking, moving and grooving, and trying to get back into the norm. Our connection in Philadelphia is going strong at 10:30 on Saturdays. You go into Blog Talk, scroll down, type in Empress Chi, New Day Resurrection, it's a number there. You press 1 and you begin on the conversation and anything going down in Philly. Sister Filet will let you know. Excellent program. Also, our brother, the irritating genie, Kamati Live, Sankofa Revolutionary Radio, WSYPLP 95.1 FM, African Perspective out of Birmingham, Alabama. Our brother, the irritating genie, has just come out with a new book. And you can get this on War on the Horizon website, and we have 3 copies here just for the audience. And the title is Jews Are the Problem. World War III, COVID-19, medical censorship, food shortages, economic collapse, abortion, mass misintegration, race mixing, globalization, inflation, gas prices, racial conflict, normalization of pedophilia, pornography and sexuality of children in schools, feminism, lesbianism, homosexuality, opiate crisis, and global genocide. The irritated genie went beyond the call of duty, and it's an excellent book. And he gives you the reference to go. So we have this for the irritated genie. Also, our brother Darren Muhammad, State of the City, TuneIn Radio, Saturdays at 12 o'clock. Glen Burnie, WEBF, 1590 AM, Glen Burnie, and also Instagram, Mohammed the Cannon, and Facebook Live. That's on Saturdays at 12 o'clock and on Thursdays at 7 o'clock. Our brother out of Baltimore. Also on Monday, Tuesdays at 7 p.m., Dr. Aline, Your Immunity Project. That's another good program. If you put your email, I'll let you know what's going on with it. Also, on Tuesdays at 5 o'clock, one of the hottest shows on the East Coast, our brother Mike Graves, Community Cop, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, MNN.org, That comes on at 5 o'clock every Tuesday. Mike Graves, Noreen, and Julian Hall. Also, on YouTube, if you type in Community Cop, all the programs will come up. Also, information to the community. We have African Echoes on Friday with our Newark connection, Brother Trucks. And they have a study group, and we're doing the psychology of self-hatred, self-defeat, or the reclamation of the African mind. If you put your email in there, you can tune into that study group, and it's real good. Also, on Saturdays, out of Asbury Park, the Know Thyself study group with Brother True. That comes on at 1:30 also. Our Brother Trust Graham does that. If you put your email in there, you can log on, and then when you send Brother True your email, he will send you the link. And Brother Danny will send you the link for the Friday group. So we have this information to the community. And that's what we're about. So the books are here, and there's books everywhere. All information is in books. And Professor Mackey had books all over. Professor Amos had books all over. So we have these books. So without further ado, anybody that wants to see all the videos from the Brooklyn William Mackey Jr. History Club, you can go on YouTube, type in BK William Mackey Jr. History Club, and all our lectures will come up. Dr. Lewis, Mike Graves, Sister Keisha, Brother Kaba. So, without further ado, everybody stand up and give a big hand, Zoom audience, to our keynote speaker, Brother Kaba.
My brother Naj, if I turn this around, could you focus in on this?
Yes, I can.
This is one way we Hotep family. You know, when my brother was talking about Dr. Mackey's books, it reminds me of when we visited his home one time. And there was a project that we were working on. And I remember the brother that came with us, when he got to Dr. Mackey's, as we were moving through his apartment, the brother said to Dr. Mackey, he said, Dr. Mackey, have you read all these books? And Dr. Mackey said, well, for you to ask me that question, it's like if you went into someone's wine cellar and asked them if they drank all that wine. And the one thing I always respected about Dr. Mackey was that his brilliance, yet he was always behind the scenes. You know, because there are so many that we know, but Dr. Mackey achieved so much. He did so much. And when we call names in libations, sometimes there are folk that we just don't necessarily call. And Dr. Mackey's name should be there all the time. For those that go back to CCNY with Dr. Jeffries, when he taught at CCNY, and when he had his own lecture series, when he bought the apartment. You know, we all talk about ownership. Dr. Mackey did his thing. And I just remember that he was someone that did what he said and said what he did. That's the one thing I remember about Dr. Mackey. So as I think of him being invited here, it's such a great honor, because the only way that we can honor those that came before us, because we do a lot. We say a lot, we name streets after our great heroes and sheroes, and we name buildings after them. But the only way we can ever really honor those that came before us is to continue their work. And to be able to do what El Hajj Malik Shabazz was doing, and to do what Dr. Mackey and Dr. Clark and Dr. Beck was doing. And so many of us, as I see those that follow in their footsteps are continuing, I've always thought my place contribution was in education, specifically our young. And one of the things that I remember, and my license is in early childhood, because I wanted to get our babies, I wanted to get them young, because I realized what happens to the human mind as they mature. I taught a course in college, Malcolm X. Taught it for 11 years at SUNY Newport, upstate New York, 82 miles north of New York. And I remember a phenomenal sister Margaret Wade Lewis, who was the director of Black Studies. She said the course is titled Malcolm X, the Man of His Times. And I developed a syllabus that focused in on Malcolm. And she asked to meet with me, and I went into her office and she said, this is a great course on Malcolm, but it's important that you focus on his times, the times that he lived. Not just him, but the times. Because she said, and this is something that I've remembered throughout all the years that I've developed it. We all know it, but sometimes we don't focus in on it. And that is that each of us are born during certain times. And those times that we're born in shape us. But our response to those times, we shape the times that we're living in. And when I looked at the life of El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz from 1925 to 1965, I began to realize his real impact on what he had done. Not just his life, not just what he did, but the impact and how he shaped the times. He was bold enough and strong enough and intelligent enough to not just let the times shape him, go along to get along. You know, it's like the story of, the question is, a log in water, a log will go where the waves push it, okay? Wherever it may push. The log, if the wave pushed to the east, the log moves to the east. Pushed to the north, it'll go to the north. But a swimmer knows how to use his or her body to be able to navigate the water so that no matter what the wave may do, the person can go under the wave, over the wave, through the wave. And when I look at people like El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, I look at people like Dr. Mackey, I see people that were swimmers, not logs. And so I always ask the question, are you a swimmer or are you a log? Are you going to allow the times to shape you and you go along, get along? Or are you going to push back on it and do something different? And in education, particularly our young people, particularly now with the internet, with information that I've received, I have students that contact me. I just saw a student I had the other day from the very first school I taught in the South Central Bronx, CES 7, Community Elementary School 7. And he was saying, man, I remember you taught us Kiswahili. You know, I taught Medu in second grade. I didn't teach it as language, I taught it as art. Because when you teach it as language, in a child's mind, second grade, 6, 7, 8 years of age, they'll get it. But sometimes the transfer is not there because they don't have that strong a foundation in the language that they're thinking in. Medu and other languages, Kiswahili, can be better absorbed as we mature and we master the language that we're thinking in, whatever it may be, English, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, Suriname. And so there were certain things that I learned about education. There were certain things that I learned about children. I used my classroom as my classroom. And while those that strive to get PhDs, my PhD was in the classroom with children. And my professors were 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds. I've taught every grade. I've taught every subject, purposefully. Because I wanted to get a sense of the growth. My work with Dr. Amos Wilson and Sababu, in terms of sharing information I had with Dr. Wilson about my experiences, being on the front lines of South Central Bronx. I spent my entire career in South Central Bronx, District 9. And I purposely stayed there so I could track the children that I had been exposed to, as opposed to jumping around from Bronx to Brooklyn to other districts to other schools. You don't always get a chance to track the children. You don't see them all the time. And I spent my career in South Central Bronx with children growing from being 5 years of age to seeing them on the bus when they were 22. Talking to them when they were in college, but they were in my first grade class. And so this is what Dr. Clark asked me to do. When I asked Dr. Clark, how could I best contribute to the community? He told me that we would have principals, black principals. He said that we would have millionaires. We'd have schools. He said, but the one thing we don't have is a curriculum. Once the child gets in the classroom, what are you going to teach them? What are you going to say to them? And one of the things that I saw using Dr. Wade Noble's example, brilliant scholar out of California, he said there's a difference between content and intent. Content is what you teach. Intent is how you teach it. There's a Moorish proverb that says, after you've learned what you set out to learn, you can put that to the side because it was the process of learning it that was the greatest education. And out of that concept, studying it, because it hit me, and I said, wait a minute, now, what does this mean? I understood methodology, I understood content, but what does it mean? To do that, you have to study brain. You have to study the brain. You have to understand how the brain functions. Like right now, I'm well aware of what I'm doing. And what I am doing is coming from the frontal lobe of your brain, called the Broca system. The Broca system is where you have speech production. Whenever you talk, your ability to talk comes out of your Broca system of your brain, the frontal lobe. What you're doing when you're sitting there, assimilating and absorbing what I'm saying, you're using a part of your brain known as the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is where the Wernicke system is. The Wernicke system is where you have speech comprehension. When we're talking to children, when we're talking to each other, when we're talking in a classroom, that's something a teacher needs to know. What you say is very important. And how you produce that speech, how you produce what you're saying is very important. And your observation of the child who is receiving this information is also very important, which means that you have to understand body language. For instance, as I'm talking, I can see people shaking their head, okay? That is a kinesthetic intelligence. A lot of us do, we shake our heads. And then as you're talking, all of a sudden, you may slow up the shaking of your head. Which means that I may not be getting as through to you as I was before when you were shaking your head in agreement. And then if you stop shaking your head, I have to consider, are you receiving the information anymore that I'm saying to you, or did I make you drift off into another thought? Which happens. As an educator, that's something that you need to know. This is something in the classroom that you need to know, but our teachers are not exposed to this. And so I dedicated myself to developing the courses. I've got something called quick webinars that I do every Tuesday. We're finishing up we have like about an 18-part series on the brain, looking at the lobes of the brain, looking at the various ways in which the brain functions, looking at two of the areas that we all need to know as parents, as people. The amygdala, which is in the limbic system of your brain, which is the house of your emotions. Everything that you have a facial expression for is housed in your amygdala. A-M-Y-G-D-A-L-A. I spell, I'm teaching, I gotta spell. In case you want to do research on this. The amygdala. When we're in a classroom and we are instilling fear in the children, you're gonna fail. Or if you fail this test, your mama gonna whip you. Okay? The way in which that child is attempting to assimilate information now comes out of fear. Fear of being beat, fear of not going down south in the summer because they may have to go to summer school, fear of failing a test. How about us as adults? When it's called test anxiety, when you're ready to take a test. And you begin to freak out. You get sick to the stomach sometimes, you get headaches, you start to sweat. Okay, well, what you're actually experiencing is test anxiety. And the reason why you're feeling test anxiety is because you have been taught that information from your house of fear, as opposed to where you should be learning, which is your hippocampus. The hippocampus, Hippocampus. It's also in the limbic system of your brain. And that is the place of your long-term memory. Can you remember a teacher in your life that you just made an impact on your life? I hope you get at least one. But there's somebody that's had impact on you. Somebody that you remember, Miss Robinson or Mr. Jones. He could have been your gym teacher, might have been a science teacher, might have been somebody that worked in the lunchroom, but they had an impact on you.
there's a very good chance that the reason, like for instance, Dr. Clark is somebody that I would think of. And the reason why I tell people, if Dr. Clark had been a basket weaver, I'd be here teaching you how to weave baskets. Because I'm glad he did history, our history. But the impact that he had on me as an educator, just the type of person that he was, had such an impact on me. But here was the key. Whenever I was in Dr. Clark's presence, I felt safe. I felt safe. I felt that no matter what the criticism was, it was going to be constructive, and it was because he cared about me. I felt that the things that he was telling me beyond the shadow of a doubt was in my best interest. He was teaching to my hippocampus. He was teaching to my long-term memory. That's why I call his name even to this day. My father used to always talk about his kindergarten teacher that had an impact on me. So the person can go way back in your life, could come very current in your life. But as a teacher, we have to understand the difference between teaching to fear and teaching to long-term memory. Because when you learn in long-term memory, you never forget. There are people that have Alzheimer's, there are people that have various learning disabilities, but they'll remember you. And normally they'll remember you because you made them feel safe. Now there's another level, which is a negative level, but we're not going to deal with that. Because there are people you remember because they instill fear in you. I'm talking about the positive as we're educated. And so what we've attempted to do is to create for us. I am not depending on anybody else. Personally, I think sometimes on a different level. Personally, I think this debate over CRT is the best thing that could have happened for us. Because I don't want none of them with our legacy in their hands anyway. I'm not interested in teaching their children. I'm not interested in teaching them. I'm interested in teaching our children. I don't care if you put this curriculum, if you teach what happens. It doesn't make a difference to me whatsoever because I know for a fact you can't handle this. You don't even know how to teach what you went to school to teach the children. How are you going to teach something that you don't know because you don't even know who you are? So how are you going to teach me who I am? So if we were to just shift our thinking, the paradigm of our thinking, we would understand that many times we get caught up in their problem because we are making their perception our perception. Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, the great Senegalese scholar, says that when someone wishes to oppress another person, this has nothing to do with culture. This has to do with, I mean, this is what Russia's doing in Ukraine right now. Okay? This is what people who wish to oppress you will do to you. They'll take your history, they'll take your language, and they'll take your psychological factor, what Dr. Leonard Jeffries calls your VIPs, your values, your interests, and your principles. And then they will superimpose on you their history, their language, their values, interests, and principles. So, when you're making decisions in life, they're never in your best interest because you're looking at the world through someone else's eyes. And this is what we're experiencing. As we view the world around us, every moment we spend talking about them is a moment we're not talking about us. And for me, I've had it. It's time for us now to understand and to deal with certain concepts that now we have to go into the classroom, and this is why I developed my webinar series. This is why I created my webinar series, because the people that I go to are the people that you honor. Dr. William Mackey, Gil Noble. I grew up, people used to try to get me to go to their church, and I say, no, I already go to church. And they used to say, what church you go to? I said, I go to the church of like it is. Because that's where I am on Sunday at 1 o'clock. They said, well, who your pastor? I said, my pastor is Reverend Gil Noble. And then I would tell them about Soul Train on Saturday. I learned how to dance on Saturday, and I learned how to think on Sunday. I don't use the word unapologetically or unashamedly black. I have nothing to apologize for, and I have nothing to be ashamed of. I'm black first. And I'm just very clear on my concepts. I'm about us first. I'm not interested in anything other than getting us forward, particularly our children. I've had enough experiences with our children to know that our children are great. The work that you see Dr. Amos Wilson doing in the psychology of the black child and awakening the genius in black children, I've experienced that. For 31 years, 3 months, and 15 days, I experienced the genius of our children. And that's my greatest disappointment. My greatest disappointment is we really don't realize how great we really are. For us to be sitting in this room after all we've been through, I don't care where you are in the station of your life. You could be President of the United States, Supreme Court judge. You could be from one place to another. You could wait for the light to turn red with a cup in your hand to ask the brother or sister in the car for $1. If you're black and alive in 2022, you're a walking miracle. Because when you study our history, you come to realize you were not meant to be here right now. You were a commodity, an object, to be used and thrown away. Yet even when they threw us in the trash, we jumped out and made the worst of the foods they gave us gourmet. So even when people come from outside the country, they got to go get a little bit of soul food from Amy Ruth. We are magnificent people that have done magnificent things.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes, sir.
you know, Brother Mike, when you study, when you think of where you've evolved as it relates to security and law enforcement, you weren't supposed to be there. They set a whole system in place to make sure you never did what you did.
That's right. That's right.
I try not to tell people that black folk are superior, but I get lost in my thoughts because we are. Not because we're black, but because we're black. They've thrown everything to stop us, yet despite it, still we rise. And yet we sit in these jobs as teachers, as police officers, as lawyers, judges, and we really don't understand how great we are. It's called the imposter syndrome. I'm doing a webinar on it. It's called the imposter syndrome. And one of the greatest examples of the imposter syndrome that I could give us was when our sister, phenomenal singer Whitney Houston, joined the Ancestors. Kevin Costner did a 21-minute eulogy on her. And he spoke about when he had reached out to her to do the bodyguard. And he said how he had to convince her that she could do the part. That she believed that she could not do it, that she could not sing those songs. Imposter syndrome, that's why I tell people, I'm not humble. And I don't have humility. Humble is when you put yourself in a lesser position to put someone in a higher position. And as peoples of African descent, many times we find ourselves doing that. I think Michael Jackson suffered from the imposter syndrome. I think that Prince suffered from the imposter syndrome. I think so many of us who rise to high levels live in the imposter syndrome because they built a system that if you are not of European descent, male in particular, no matter who you are, no matter how great you are, you still ain't as good as the most mediocre of them. The imposter syndrome. Now I can understand certain concepts, but when you understand how great you are, if each and every one of us were to leave this room truly understanding how phenomenal we are. I'm talking about evidence. And if you want the evidence, if you're here alive, that's the evidence of your greatness. Think of all the things you've had to go through. Think of some of us that went to work today and some of the things that you had to go through at work, knowing that you are more qualified than the people that jump above you. And yet still you have to deal with that nonsense. take this over. We do respect, I respect and honor anybody that's doing anything for black people. Reparations, I'm for anybody that want reparations. I don't want reparations. I want America. I don't want your crumbs. I don't want you to put me to fight against other African people from around the world for some crumbs. I want to own the block where the bakery is on that bake the cake. But that's where our mindset has to be. Our mindset has to be up here. Not asking for crumbs. I want to own the block. I want America. We built America. They say immigrants built America. No, immigrants did not build America. The land that the house was built on belonged to indigenous people who were also African, but that's a conversation for another day. Black folk built America.
That's right.
Now, immigrants may have come and furnished the house, but they did not build America.
That's right.
Black people built America. We're still building America. So I don't want them reparations. I respect anybody that wants reparations. Please understand what I'm saying. Any way we can get anything, I'm for it. But my mindset is to take America. Brother Mike, the last time I was here, we were talking about the great Empress Henrietta Lacks. And you asked a question. And I did not feel that I had responded to your question properly. So what I did is I made my business. You see, you know, with kindergarten children, when they used to say something that I didn't know the answer to, I would say, wow, that's a great idea. But I don't know the answer. Dr. Ben told me that. Dr. Ben said, I have a right not to know everything. But I have no right not to find out after I know I don't know it. So I used to tell my 5-year-olds, well, I didn't know that. So tonight, I'm going to study, I'm going to find out, and I want you to study, and tomorrow, when we come back, you tell me what you learned about, and I'm going to tell you what I learned. And so I've always understood that if you don't respond properly, thank you, brother, that there is a way that you still can develop and understand a way. Your question was about telomeres. You remember?
Yes, yes.
And so what I did was, this is the first slide. From the last time we were together, we were discussing the immortal Empress Henrietta Lacks. That's my name for her, by the way. She's the Empress Henrietta Lacks.
Not queen,
Empress to me, okay? Empress. When I was doing work on my book, Shabbat Stone, I was studying DNA structures. In order to show the relationship of how Africans can trace their legacy back and how they can go back to the first. I also studied the Y chromosome, because now the Y chromosome, like mtDNA, can be traced, so can the Y DNA, which is the male chromosome. Some serious research is out here, family. We can trace our lineage back to the Twa and Mbuti people. The first human family, derogatorily, the Moesha, as Dr. Rosalind Jeffers has written a book, Moesha, the Twa, the Mbuti, the Khoi, the San, Southern Africa, they're all related. Okay? You can call, if you want to look today, look to the Kung people, K-U-N-G, Kung people with the upside down exclamation point before the K, the Kung people of Southern Africa. And so when I was doing my research on DNA, I was brought into my search engine into Henrietta Lacks. She died in 1950, going on 72 years now, 1950. And the Johns Hopkins in Maryland took cells from her.
That's right.
Unbeknownst to her or her family. And I did an entire webinar, to get deep inside Empress Henrietta Lacks, I encourage you to go to my webinar. I have my card here. You can go to my website, you can go to my Instagram page, and you can register for the webinar. But in looking at her life, when I first began, I used to call her Henrietta Lacks. But when I found out who she was, she became Empress Henrietta Lacks. It's not that I wouldn't have found her to be phenomenal, but when I found out about that, I spoke last time, and Brother Michael asked a question about a telomere. And so what I'd like to do before we get into what I came to talk about, because believe me, this has just been a warning. Let me know when my time is running, okay?
We're gonna go to 10:30, we're not gonna have a break.
Okay. Or however you like to work. Before we get into what I'd like to talk about, I want to answer 3 questions. What is a telomere? What is a telomerase? And why are they important? A telomere is a region of repetitive sequences at each end of the chromosome of most eukaryotes or mammals. It's a region of repetitive sequences, and there's something that it does. Telomeres protect the end of the chromosome from DNA damage or from fusion with neighboring chromosomes. In other words, telomeres is like a protective guard around your chromosomes that ensure that as your chromosomes are developing, that they first and foremost are protected. They act as security for the purity of your chromosome. But at the same time, they also make sure that your chromosomes are not damaged when other chromosomes may get in the way, because sometimes we get in each other way all the time now. So a telomere would be somebody that would separate us and keep us apart to make sure that the purity of that chromosome stays true. And the chromosome that's about to bump into it stays true. That's what a telomere is. That is, in Henrietta Lacks, that is what makes her cells immortal. She is immortal. They took her cells into space. And what they found out in space is that her cells multiply quicker in space than they do on Earth. PC, because my next one was on Dr. Mae Jameson.
She's not from here.
Who?
Henrietta Lacks.
None of us are.
Oh boy.
That was my point in the webinar. We are of star stuff. We just happen to be encapsulated in this tomb that we call a body. And for however many years we live, our spirit is always trying to escape, particularly when we go to sleep. But in the morning, we're captured back and we have another day to live. We bless the day that we live, but we don't realize that night we tried to get the hell up out of here. Say again? There are 2 realities on Earth, but there are multiple realities once you join the ancestors. Black folk never feared death. Death didn't exist. From the research that I've looked at, the Book of the Coming Forth, Today by Night, the Pyramid Text, you can go over to West Africa and study the Yoruba traditions, or the Igbo. You see, we get caught up in Egypt, which is good, because there's a lot of written material. But don't lose sight of West Africa. Don't lose sight of Yoruba. Don't lose sight of the Orishas. Don't lose sight of the dynamic relationship between West Africa and East Africa. And yes, Africans were born in the central southern region of the world, and they fused out, according to Dr. Clyde Winters. But there was dynamic relationships through the water systems of Africa. Because when we look at the rivers today, it's one thing, but drying up and desiccation and things like that sort of kind of make the rivers get smaller. But at one time, all the rivers of Africa were connected. From the Hapi to the Congo to the Limpopo to the Orange of Southern Africa, going up into North Africa, there was a river known as the Taman Rasset that started started in Algeria, in the Atlas Mountains, and swept down into the southern coast of Mauritania. About 5,000 years ago, there was a drying up of this area. And in the drying up of the area, Africans that were on the southern side of the Taman-Rasset River went south. Africans that were north of the Taman-Rasset River went north. The ones that went north are now who we call the Moors, and the ones that went south are the ones that we call West Africans. They were all connected at one time. From the Niger River to the Congo River, Africans were on the waters. The very first people were hunters and gatherers, the Twa-Mbuti people, according to Dr. Obata Shaka in his book, The Integration Act. They were hunters and gatherers. They hunted and they gathered berries and nuts and fruits, and that's how they ate. From there, then they became fishermen, where they went onto the waters and mastered boat building. And that's when they started traveling throughout the entire continent. They started to break off. And so this is where you see the Twa and Mbuti people become the Kush Kemet. This is where you see the Twa and Mbuti become the Yoruba, the Ghanaians, the Senegalese. That's where you see them moving south. That's where you see them moving north. We are a phenomenal people. The more I study our history, the more in love I fall with us. To understand what we've been through, who we are as a people, what we've achieved, what people have stolen from us and got it all wrong. I wouldn't have minded if you got it right. Everything, and that is because they were from the ice. And they had ice water that ran through their system.
Cold people.
Cold-blooded people.
That's right.
That's the one thing they and parasites have in common. They're cold-blooded. And here we are, people looking at them, trying to find a warmth, and it's not there. And of course, I don't speak in absolutes. I'm not talking about everybody. But I remember Dr. Edward Scobie used to say, Booker T, don't tell me nothing about no good white people. Because good white people act as shields for the bad ones. Young Elijah Muhammad used to tell us that there were 1,000 wolves outside your door. 100 of them would do anything to protect you, respect you, and honor you. 900 want to tear you apart. The problem is you don't know where those 100 are. The question is, are you ready to go outside? No, because I don't know where those 100 are. I tell my folk all the time, I know you're there. I ain't got time to look for you. Because I'm dealing with them 900 wolves that are ready to tear us apart. I know they exist. We don't, we're living in a world that when you're bit by the vampire, you start to act like the vampire. You start to think like the vampire. And so you take on their attributes. Even though you avoided Dracula the whole movie, if he gets you the last 2 minutes, you start acting like Dracula. That's what a parasite does. And the parasite is to be watched. There's a book called Parasite Rex by Carl Zimmer, Carlzimmer. He talks about the history of the parasite. The parasite's function. The parasite has no reason to live. In science, a parasite is called a free radical. A free radical is what gives you skin cancer. It's the harmful rays of the sun. The same rays that will do wonders for you, that will cure you. There's another aspect of a ray that will give you skin cancer, that is not good for you. It's a free radical. Cancer in the body is a free radical. Europeans in the human family is a free radical. They are the ones that have lost one of their neutrons. They are who our great sister Dr. Marimba Ani calls Yoruba, the incomplete one. The one that is born to be alone all of their lives. Look at all that's going on now. Look at how they all say they're loners, they stay to themselves. Quite frankly, they're incels. They don't know how to relate to each other, and they certainly don't know to function the male doesn't know the function of the woman in their society.
Yep.
And this is the world that we're living in, and these are conditions that we have to look in. And that is why I've come to our community, working with us and for us, not caring about going to them and trying to get them to validate something that they wouldn't even understand if I gave them the information. We have to do this on our own. So that is what a telomere is. Now, a telomerase, anytime you have an ASE at the end of something, particularly in chemistry, it's an enzyme. Like you have tyrosine, and then you have tyrosinase. Okay, you have peroxide, and you have peroxidase. When you add an ASE, it becomes an enzyme. Telomerase is an enzyme that adds nucleotides to telomeres, especially in cancer cells. See, we're getting to the HeLa cell with our system. The HeLa, and it's named after her. You know they changed the name? They changed the name because they didn't want people to relate back to Henrietta Lacks. They still called it the HeLa cells because it had already been embedded in the scientific community. But they just never said it was Henrietta Lacks that they were talking about. They changed the name in order to hide their sins. The HeLa, Henrietta Lacks cell line, was derived for use in cancer research. These cells proliferate abundantly and rapidly, even compared to other cancer cells. Like many other cancer cells, HeLa cells have an active version of telomerase during cell division, which copies telomeres repeatedly. This is what makes her immortal. That her enzyme that does the work is constantly manipulating and protecting the chromosome in order for it to multiply constantly. But why is it important? Because blacks don't crack. This is what that means. Blacks don't crack. Because when you crack, it means that your telomeres are being interrupted. It means that your telomerase, the enzyme, is not allowed to function the way it should function in order to, A, protect you, to protect your chromosome, and at the same time, to be able to make sure that other chromosomes, unbeknownst, are not interfering with those cells. HeLa cells prevent the incremental shortening of telomeres that is implicated in aging and eventual cell death. Do you know how many of you in this room had COVID and never knew it? Do you know when they talk about when you carry it but you don't get impacted by it? The same thing happens with cancer. Do you know how many of you have had cancer and your body has fought it through melanin and changed the direction? And actually murdered the cancer cells. And then you went to the bathroom and they left your body either in solid or in liquid form. And we don't even know. Our body heals us constantly. And melanin is the doctor. And that's what we're talking about here. In this way, the cells circumvent the Hayflick limit, which is the limited number of cell divisions that most normal cells can undergo before becoming senescent, or what's called the aging process. That's why blacks don't crack. That is why no matter what they've done to us, we're still here. Henrietta Lacks, they said, had cervical cancer, yet her cervical cancer cells are still multiplying at phenomenal rates, and they don't see when it will ever end. And then when they took her cells in space, they multiplied more than they did on Earth. Which tells you something about the fact that we are children of the sun. The nitrogen and stuff in our bodies that created this physical body was what the Creator needed in order to come inside of us to become a living entity. Because what makes, Dr. Sabi used to always say, Booker T, you're always talking about melanin. You need to talk about carbon. That's my next book. In fact, tonight is an introduction to my next book. You know, we're really a great people. You're going to hear me say that a couple of times tonight. Because we've been saying it for decades, but for some reason it hasn't sunk in. We don't understand our magnificence of who we are as a people, what we've achieved, what we go through every day. That you wake up and go to bed, you perform a miracle living through your day. Physically, mentally, spiritually, and soulfully. And to our elders, my goodness gracious, younger need to sit down and take notes. Richard Pryor used to say, you don't get old by being a fool. The result is unlimited cell division and immortality. And the point that I'm trying to make in answering my brother Michael's question is that while we're looking at elolacs, all of you are elolacs. Your cells are immortal. Your cells live forever. Even when your body may go, you still live forever. And that's Heru, that's the resurrection. That's what the resurrection represents. Our ancestors understood this. In Kush, in Kemet, they understood that this is why you see the Heru as a bird with wings flying. Because when you study forensics, you understand that the way in which they judge the age of your body is by carbon-14, nitrogen-14 dating. Carbon has a half-life. It lives, but it has a half-life. And this is how they can say, well, this body has been around for 100,000 years, because they can judge it by the carbon that's there and the nitrogen that is left in the ground. For non-animate things, for things that they say are not living, which doesn't exist, everything lives, it just lives in its own way. Rocks live. Don't let them tell you that rocks don't live. Rocks have a life. The earth is Gaia. It's a living, the earth is a living planet. It's about to prove something to us pretty soon, too. But when you deal with concepts dealing with the cells of a human being, they are immortal, and when you die, your electrons begin to leave your body. Okay, and that's the Baba, that's the soul, the Baba. Okay, it's leaving your body, and as it's leaving your body, when they measure your body, they judge the carbon that's still there, but the whole time, for thousands of years, electrons are always leaving your body, no matter what. That's decomposition, that's when you're in the grave. This is science, but it's spirituality, because that's the resurrection of the soul. That's what our ancestors meant. They didn't want you to take it literally. They wanted you to understand that spirituality is unseen science, and science is seen spirituality. It's very straightforward. So your cells are immortal because of carbon. Because as your electrons leave your body, it joins the carbon that brought your life on the earth in the first place. This is why I get a kick out of this new stuff that they're doing with NASA. And NASA, you know, they got this new James Weeks something telescope. Our ancestors told you that in Shabaka Stone thousands of years ago. They were telling you the same thing, but they told it to you in metaphor. And now they need a telescope to prove what our ancestors was telling us spiritually. And when I say spiritual, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about energy. Spirit is energy. So, Blackstone Christ. This is who we are as a people. And this is why they do to us what they do. And this is why they don't want children to be taught history. Can you imagine? You know, Dr. Asa Hilliard and I, now before Ahmad Twakia, worked in Florida between 1989 and about 1994. Florida, Broward County was developing a curriculum. They had the multicultural thing going. And they brought Dr. Hilliard in to do the administrators and the principals, and they brought me in to do staff development for the teachers. What Florida is now dismantling is the curriculum we developed. Ain't got nothing to do with CRT. That's nonsense. CRT, critical race theory, is an advanced law class that you take in law. You don't teach CRT. You can't teach CRT. But you teach my curriculum. And as we go through some of the slides that I've developed, I want you to keep in mind why they don't want this in the classroom. If I were them, I wouldn't want it in the classroom either. My mama used to always say, you know, Skip, that's my nickname. In order for you to defeat your enemy, you got to think like your enemy. You can't think like you. You know, like for instance, when you're a police officer. Yeah, you can think like a police officer, but you got to think like a criminal. Because how you going to catch the criminal if you're thinking like you? You see Giuliani used to get all the big wigs. He got in too deep. He got so deep into organized crime, he became an organized criminal. He got in too deep. They done a movie, I think what Mike Epps called In Too Deep. When you get into something, but you get in so much like actors get into it. When they do their parts, they get so deep in the part. Method acting, exactly. They can't get out. So they become what they play. And so what we're looking at as we develop all of this understanding of what we're facing is that folk are getting in too deep. And they can't get out. So, my concept is tell the children the truth so they can fix things. Just tell them the truth so they can fix things. Our children deserve the best. When they're born into a world and the times shape them. And the most important thing that we can do as adults is to not only assist in the shaping of the times that they're living in, but also show them how they can shape the times as they move through their life. These are the children that I'm used to looking at in my classroom. These are the children in our community. Preparing our children and community for the 21st century, culture, curriculum, and consciousness. When I was dropping this on Brother Rager, he said, I think we're going to stick with preparing our children and community for the 21st century. And I'm dealing with the children of George Washington Carver. One of the things that I do in my presentation is I look at the left and right hemisphere of the brain. It's called stereognosis. Stereo and then Gnosis. Stereognosis. And it means that the crossing of the right and the left hemispheres of the brain. That if you're right-handed, they say you tend to lean to the left side of the brain, which is analytical. And if you're left-handed, you tend to lean towards the right side of your brain, which is analogical. The left side of your brain is your mathematician, your scientist, and your reasoning skill. The right side of your brain is your artist, your musician, the one that creates concepts. The left side of your brain is the part of the brain that says, I can't see the forest for the trees. The right side of your brain is the one that says, I can't see the trees for the forest. Africans say, I see the trees in the forest, and I know the forest is made up of trees. Oh. You use both sides of your brain. How did I do it in the classroom? I would give children math problems to do. Addition, subtraction, first grade. But I would say as homework, not only do I want you to solve these problems, but I also want you to draw them. However you want to draw it. So what was I doing? The left side of your brain was what calculated the problem, but the right side of your brain is what made you draw it. You have a middle part of your brain known as the corpus callosum. And that is what is the bridge between your left and right hemisphere. It's what sends the messages throughout your brain. When you get deep inside of your brain, you have an area of your brain that connects the thought process of your thalami, is called the optic thalami, which is an actual gland. And in that gland, you have your left thalami, you have your right thalami, or thalamus, which is singular. But the optic thalami is what connects the two, and it sends messages of feelings between both sides of your brain. And so what our ancestors always attempted to do was not just use one side of the brain. See, people say, well, I'm left-sided, or I'm right-sided. No, be both-sided. That's why I call this George Washington Carver. The genius of George, to me, George Washington Carver is like Emperor George Washington Carver. Because George Washington Carver was not just the greatest scientist of the 20th. Now, I know people give Albert Einstein, okay, Time magazine said, okay, you know, I'm not going to argue, right? But I know George Washington Carver was the greatest thinker.
Yes, sir.
Not just scientist, he was the greatest thinker of the 20th century. Because unbeknownst to a lot of people, even though George Washington Carver did phenomenal things in science, he was also a great artist. I'm developing a webinar looking at George Washington Carver's artwork. George Washington Carver used to draw plants. And then he would go out into the field and talk to the plants.
That's right.
Okay? Now I know we think about talking as like the plants have a mouth and talk. But when you're African, you understand esoterically there are other ways that nature talks to you. Okay? Like, let's not be children. They're always children. They're always literal, thinking that talking is like what we're doing now. As opposed to understanding that when you're one with nature, George Washington Carver could look at a plant, and that plant could literally let him know what their purpose was.
That's right.
Because one time he went out into the field, he stayed out for about 8 days, he came back with 52 inventions. They said to him, Dr. Carver, how'd you do that? He said, well, the plants talk to me. And they wrote a scathing report, laughing at him and talking at him, talking about him, that the plants are talking to him. To which he asked a simple question. Well, how did I create 52 inventions? And then that shut him up. Because how did he come with 52 inventions? He's out there alone. It's just him and the plants. That's it. But you see, this is why we got to get away from the way they think, because the way they think is literal. Okay? Black folk, their minds are linear. Black folk are linear, but we're curvilinear. We take that straight line and we curve it. In Africa, there's a proverb saying, hit a straight line with a curved stick. That's what rap music is. That's what hip-hop culture is. That's what reggae is. That's what doo-wop. If it hadn't been for doo-wop, there wouldn't have been hip-hop. If it wasn't for bebop, there wouldn't have been doo-wop. Doo-wop came from rhythm and blues came from spiritual came from the plantation, and all that came from Africa.
That's right.
Got to go back to nature, family. Nature was our first teacher. There was a bird that used to fly overhead. It was a massive bird. And when it would fly overhead, the sound was so they named the bird Heru. Nature taught us everything just like Emperor George Washington Carver. Nature taught us language. There was a bird, made sound, Looked up, it became the letter A of the alphabet that we have today. It's the vulture. And that's why the vulture represents the sound A, Nature taught us this. We talk about the Broca and the Wernicke area in the brain. We spoke about the center of speech articulation is the Broca. The center of speech comprehension is the Wernicke system. I show you because, fam, we have to learn this. We taught them this. Okay, so I know a lot of times we think like I'm really into Beethoven. Okay, people say, you into that white music. We don't understand that Beethoven, not only was he black, but Mozart's teacher was a black man named Suleiman. We don't understand that in the early 1600s, there was music that was brought to Europe, and Africans had taken the harp, turned it sideways, encased it in wood, took the principles of the xylophone, used their hands, and created the piano. So instead of a harp stringing like this, they turned the harp sideways, put it in wood. That's why when you look at a baby grand, that's a harp inside the piano. Baroque music is black music. I can connect Oscar Peterson, Thelonious Monk, to Beethoven, to the Twa people in the click language. I can show you the connection between the first language, the click language, that sound, if you want to hear it, Pata Pata by Miriam Makeba.
Yeah.
Okay, she does the click. That's the original language of the human family. Then what we did is we started to open up our mouth, put vowels in, and that separated the clicks, which now became the language, the A, E, I, O, U sounds that we create, the vowels. But the original language, because that's how nature, when you listen to nature, when you listen to crickets, when you listen to frogs, when you listen to leaves, they really do not emulate a language that we speak. What they do is that they create a sound that we replicate, and then we try to manipulate it in order so that we can communicate the concepts. And we did this before there was Europeans and Asians on the planet. For thousands of years, we peopled the planet. I'm in the process of doing a documentary now on Black Hawaii. I'm just coming back from Hawaii. I was doing some research on the original people of Hawaii. Okay, now we're tracing them back to a people known as the Lapita people. The Lapita people can be traced back to the Dravidians and to the Africans of southern Asia, back to the Kushites, back to the Twa people. King Kamehameha, Queen, the Queen Lili Kukalani. We can trace the Hawaiian language back, not just in sound, but also in art. We can trace the stick figures of Hawaii back to the stick figures of the Twa and Buti people in southern Africa. We can trace them back. Now, I know people don't want to hear it, because there's a lot of people who have gone through a transformation themselves, and they don't want to see themselves, who they claim to be Hawaiian. They say, well, just because they're dark, they're not black. Now, that don't make no sense to me. Just because they're dark don't mean they're black. Think of the ridiculousness of that statement. But this is how deep they have made us ashamed of melanin. Because that's what it comes down to. Hair texture. Hair texture has to do with an oily substance in your hair, in your sebaceous gland, known as sebum, S-E-B-U-M. In the heat of Central Africa, the oil is cooked, but it protects your scalp. But in the cooking of the oil, sebum, and it attaching itself to the follicle, it kinks the hair follicle to nappy, kinky, whatever we want to call it. When these individuals went into the cooler climates where the heat wasn't on their head, it allowed the oil to remain on their head, it attached itself to the hair follicle, and it made it straight. It ain't got nothing to do with good or bad. It has to do with your presence in the sun. So when you go to Hawaii, when you go to Australia, and you see African people with straight hair, that has nothing to do with being mixed with people with straight hair. That has to do with them moving away from the sun. It allowed the oil to be able to settle on their head and made it straight. So when you look at black Hawaiians, Duke and others, it has nothing to do with them not being African. When you look at Ethiopians and they have straighter hair, wavier hair, it has nothing to do. It has to do with their presence in the sun, because Ethiopia is not where the equator is. It's science. When someone tells a perfect lie, the truth is unbelievable. So we talk about the broker section, we get deeper into it. I show you where it is. in the brain. That's in the frontal lobe of your brain. See, family, because for me, we have to do this in science. Because this shuts the world down. See, that's why they don't invite me places. Because we don't get emotion. This is not about emotion. This is not about superior or inferior. My words to them are never superior or inferior. I deal with scientific terms known as dominant and recessive, particularly in the genes. And when you do that, white supremacy becomes an oxymoron. Because there's nothing supreme about being white. Which is recessive. And everything that white folk have is recessive. Blue eyes, blonde hair, pigmented skin. Now we have colorism as it relates to us as an African people, and we view ourselves as it relates to our own complexion. And it again stems from a lot of the pain that we have felt on the plantation, that being raped. We have gone through various complexions of pigmentation, because I don't believe in the word complexion, it doesn't exist. The word is pigmented or melanin. But at the same time, you have something known as eumelanin. And eumelanin is the internal melanin that's in every organ and gland in your body. Without it in your heart, it wouldn't beat. Without it in your circulatory system, it wouldn't circulate. Without it in your respiratory system, you couldn't breathe. Without it in your reproductive system, you could not reproduce yourself. And then in your brain, you have something known as neuromelanin. And neuromelanin is the melanin in your brain. And when you're first born, no matter what culture you come from, no matter who you are born in the blackness of your mother's womb. So that when daddy's spermatozoon, which is the singular for spermatozoa, plural, when the spermatozoon fertilizes mommy's egg, it becomes a zygote. The zygote then begins to multiply its cells, called mitosis, and that becomes a blastula. That blastula has three different areas. It has an ectoderm, a mesoderm, and an endoderm. The ectoderm is the outer ring, the mesoderm is the middle ring, and the internal ring is called the endoderm. The ectoderm, the outer rim, is filled with blackness. And what happens is that it turns in on the cell itself, which is going to multiply and then attach itself in the fallopian tube to mother, that's going to go and create and go into the uterus. But in the first 28, see, sisters, when they find out that they're pregnant, they say, okay, I'm going to quit smoking, I'm going to quit drinking, I'm going to quit running around and jumping around because I want to take care of my baby. But somebody should have told mommy that the most important time of that fetus's life was the first 28 hours of its existence. Because that's when this is going to happen. And inside of this, when the ectoderm turns in on itself, that is when it starts to form the brain, the spinal column, and the spinal cord. And attaching itself to the entire ectoderm are all of the major glands and organs of your body.
Now that's in 28 hours and 28 days.
That is in 28 hours, brother. That becomes 28 days. But you see, the point that I'm making is that we're so caught, because by 28 days, sometimes, not all the time, a sister will, or a woman will miss her monthly cycle. Okay? Which then tells you something. Okay? The other thing that they don't tell you is that it's not 9 months, it's 10 months, it's 40 weeks. But if you knew what the term 40 meant as it relates to why you have 40 days and 40 nights in the fasting, 40 days and 40 nights in this, you'd understand the importance of 40, but you'd also understand 4 plus 0, which becomes 4, and a lot of things come to us cosmically. But it's the 28 hours. Research on this would be Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum in his book called Dark Light. He has a whole segment on this aspect of the first 28 hours of when that zygote becomes a blastula, and then the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm are formed, and then it turns in on itself. It starts to formulate the beginnings of life, the beginnings of the function of the brain, the beginnings of what's called the neural tube. It's important for us to know this.
So that's life right there, mitosis.
Mitosis is the cell division. when that one cell, that is two, okay, that zygote now begins to multiply. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, 8 becomes 16, and that's mitosis.
That's right.
That is the development of life as it relates to that fetus growing in its beginnings. And it continues to do that through its entire 40 weeks. And then it starts to accept, then when it's born, the baby comes out, it now grows in another way. Because it already has everything that it needs. So now it's going to start to develop in another way, which is going to grow. Its digestive system is going to grow, where it can go from just being able to deal with mother's milk, then it starts to be able to, babies even can't even drink water in the beginning. It's mother's milk. And another thing is that if a woman gets pregnant, almost immediately after her first birth, the milk that is created for that first baby is not for that second baby. That's how specific this is. This is beautiful.
It ain't the
See-
same milk.
Say what?
It ain't the same milk.
It is not the same milk specific for that baby that went through the 10 months of gestation. It's still lactation, it's still milk. But all milk ain't the same. That's why when I see these people be sharing their milk with other, well, look what they did with us with our women. Okay? You got 2 pregnant women, one woman cannot produce milk. That baby should not be suckling at that other mother's breast. That milk is not for that baby. The same thing goes for cows, by the way, too. I mean, any mother that creates, no matter what in the mammalian life, is not meant for all babies. They even got this thing where they're freezing and creating ice cream and people are eating the ice cream. That's nasty.
Because it's actually.
Cold people.
But it ain't for you. It's for baby. First of all, it shouldn't be cold. It should come directly from mother. You're barely making it when you actually will express the milk out for a later time. And also, when a mother breastfeeds, the weight and the life that the mother has created over the 10 months of gestation, that baby now is thanking mother, and the mother's body is literally being pulled back to its original place where it was before she got pregnant. So a lot of the weight that she gained, she loses. Because all that weight was gained specifically to help that baby through the process of life for 10 months. See, when you look at things from an African perspective, life becomes beautiful. When you look at it from a European, everybody wants to abort it. It becomes dollars and cents. And this is the world that we're living in. This is the world that our children are coming up in. And this is why we need to talk to our children. And this is why we need to have these types of conversations about life and what it is. Because now, back in the day, you go back 200 years, basically we were an agricultural people. So every baby born was help on the farm. So there was always room for a baby. But when you're living in this type of industrial civilization, a baby needs money. You say, oh God, it's going to take $100,000 to educate this child. I got to go out and get formula that I can't find, and now they're charging me $800 for a bottle that used to cost $8. Okay, now you're thinking about Pampers. Babies are no longer what they represented as it related to the extension of the family. Babies now are headaches for people. Now we got to go schooling, and I got to raise them, and now I got to work. Mama used to strap that baby on the back, go on the farm, do the work, and that was it. When the baby got big enough, too heavy, then the baby got off the back and started doing the work with mama. It's not like that now. The society we're living in does not replicate that. So the conversation that we're dealing with now is a horrific conversation, because on one level, I am literally contradicting myself in my views towards life. First of all, if you understood Planned Parenthood, you'd have a problem with that right off the bat. Okay? But in its evolution, you're looking at it from a different perspective. Everything grows. But as a human family, we have to look at abortion. And what I just said to you as it relates to the moment that that zygote is formed, that is a living entity with a spirit. Let's not play games with when the baby becomes a baby, whether it's the first heartbeat or when it's born. It's born from the moment spirituality tells us. Let's not argue about this. And that if you have an abortion that is taking the life of that baby and it is not conducive to black life. But now my other question becomes, who gonna pay for that baby if you gonna make that woman have that child? You got all big mouth, right? The church is talking about you can't have an abortion. You know what the woman told the Pope? You don't play the game, you don't make the rules. So we're living in a world of contradiction now. Because why as a man, it ain't none of my business what a woman does with her body. It would be good if the woman comes together with her family, has conversations, and decides what's going to happen. But when you're living in a world where every baby represents $500,000 in its lifetime that is going to be with you up until 18 or 21, there are decisions that you have to make. And the question is, do you have the money to even be able to take care of the 2 children that you have? You see, we're contradicting ourselves. I know I'm contradicting myself, but I'm owning my contradiction. Because while I'm absolutely against abortion, I'm absolutely for the right of a woman to make a decision as to what she's going to do with her body. Unless I'm going to step in and buy the Pampers and buy the formula and take care when that baby needs help, I don't have a right to speak. But that's a contradiction, and it hurts. That's what it is. And this is the world that they've created. Every woman should receive money when a baby's born. Period. Anything that needs, Pampers should become the same way they sent those COVID tests to you, the same way they were able to make that money come into your account. They should do that with every mother that is born. Okay? Send that money, and it's not even about money. Whatever you need for that baby is yours.
Gaddafi was doing that.
Say that again.
Gaddafi was doing that.
Okay, Gaddafi was doing that? Yeah. Muammar Gaddafi. You take care of the mothers, you take care of the children, you honor life. That's what Sister Catherine Nephthys used to always say, First World Alliance, when she had people, the elders stand up, and then the children under an age stand up, and then the women that were expecting life would stand up, and she'd say, blessings on life. Every week she made us aware of that honor. But we're living in contradictions now, in a very serious place, and we're going to have to come to decisions where we're headed going into our future, and decisions that we're going to make. And recognize, there are contradictions, but there are other contradictions that could make things worse than the contradiction that you live in. We're looking at the Wernicke part of the brain, where the Wernicke section, this is known as the temporal lobe of your brain, if you want to go back to the lobes of the brain. You have the frontal lobe here. Coming behind is the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe in the back, and then up underneath your limbic system comes your temporal lobe. This is the important part of the 3 parts of your brain. The connections of the brain. See, like I said, we can't understand any of this if we don't understand the brain, how the brain functions. And please don't think this is their work, this is our work that they took from us, got it messed up. Dr. Wade Nobles also says that what we're experiencing in Western civilization is vomit. Because when the Greeks sat at the feet of our ancestors, they did not have the intellectual, spiritual enzymes to break down the rich meal that the Cushites were giving them. So like all things that are too rich, that you don't have the digestive enzymes, you regurgitate, you vomit it. And that's what Western civilization is. But he warns us, don't throw it away. Examine it. Because in that vomit is the original meal. And if you recook it, you do have the enzymes to break it down. That's what I'm attempting to do. I'm examining their vomit.
Are there examples of the reptilian brain?
Well, we all have reptilian brain. They function in it. They live in that R complex brain. They live in the reptilian brain. Limbic is feelings. That's the next part of your brain. Limbic. grew out of. Your brain looks like a mushroom. The reptilian brains were all organic, all lizards, and everybody has that. But then what brought to the next level was the limbic system, which is your house of feelings. This is where we talked about your ventricular system, where your cerebrospinal fluid is produced. And then out of your limbic system grew your neocortex. And in your neocortex is responsible for thinking. And as the human being was developing itself, it had to think about different things. And as it thought, it was like, you know, your brain is like a muscle. That when you think, sometimes when you think so hard, your brain hurts, your head hurts, you have a headache. Well, that's because what's actually happening is that your thinking is making your brain throb. And the early humans had a slanted forehead.
That's right.
Okay, where everything was squashed inside. But as we thought, the muscles in our brain started to push the front of our skull further and further out. Slow but sure. So when you went from the Australopithecus robustus to the Australopithecus graecile, to the Homo habilis, to the Homo erectus, to the Homo sapiens, to the Homo sapiens sapiens, what began to happen in the later stages is that this frontal lobe came out. And this is what our forehead is. It's the frontal lobe being pushed. But when that happened, it allowed the inside of the brain to settle. And it opened up the limbic system. When it opened up the limbic system, it opened up the ventricular system. Your ventricular, you have 4 ventricles. You have 2 lateral ventricles that looks like the wings of a bird. Your lateral ventricles now come down and they form what's called the 3rd ventricle. Your 3rd ventricle comes to the 4th ventricle. Our ancestors, when they buried King Tut, they put something on his head that looked like the ventricular system. It was a bird that had the arms out, and then the body of the bird, and then the tail of the bird. That's how deep our ancestors, that's how long they've known this information. But the reptilian brain is the one that at all costs, it's like they call it the 3 brothers. You could call it the 3 sisters.
Right.
The youngest, the oldest brother or sister is the R complex. The middle brother or sister is the limbic system, the neocortex. The largest part of the brain is the youngest brother or sister. And the R complex is important. For instance, the R complex is protection of the organism at all costs. This is where they are, at all costs. It don't make a difference about feelings, don't make a difference about anything else. Brother, did you say 10 or 10:30?
10:15, you want to do a question and answer?
Yes, ma'am, we can do that. And so the idea was that the R complex is just straight up protection of the family, okay? And it tries to always overpower the 2 parts of the brain. The limbic system of feeling, you know, the R complex says, "Man, I ain't got time to feel this. I ain't got time to think about it. We gotta act. Let's act." Okay? Now, where it's good is that if you touch fire, it's reflex, you pull it back. Your experiences go through your R complex to your limbic system to your neocortex. It goes from the original, it then starts to feel, the feelings then turn into thoughts. But when your system is threatened, our complex said, "I ain't got time to feel or think." Because before you know it, limbic, you're going to feel that heat. So you pull your hand back immediately. And that's because your R complex overrode the other 2 parts of your brain and made you reflex. Like when you're walking in the street and a car comes in by it and you jump back, that's reflex. You ain't got time to feel, you ain't got time to think. Because if you spend the time to think, you're going to get hit. So that reptilian brain is important, but it has to be balanced. This is ma'at. Your brain has to be balanced, that you have the protection, the feeling, and the thought in balance. Some people's brain, the reptilian is in charge. Okay, I'm storming the Capitol, I don't care. Okay, I'm a defecating the Capitol, I don't care. You see that policeman there? I'm gonna throw that fire extinguisher at his head. I don't care. Yesterday I was talking about blue power. Today I'm saying kill it. Okay, that's the reptilian brain. That's how quick the reptilian brain can change from honor and integrity to worthlessness. And sometimes it's even us. Let's not make a mistake. We're all born with the Judas and the Messiah. All of us are born in the Asarian drama. We're all born with the hero and the villain. We're all born with the protagonist and the antagonist. The question is, who's in charge? Because, like I tell people, I got 40, people say black people are schizophrenic. I tell black people, I got 14 personalities. My wife told me, she know what I'm saying. She said, no, you got 16, because there's 2 that even you don't know. We all have personalities, family. The question is, who in charge? See, because Nat Turner, I got him under control. I say, Nat, you can't come out today. Because if you come out, that's it for all of us. And the fact that I live my life and I haven't let Nat Turner take over, they better be happy I ain't let Nat Turner take over. In order for us to be able to navigate through our life, there are certain personalities we can't let out. Because that would be it. And we know that. So what we do is we balance our life. So that every so often I'll let Nat rattle the bars. Because it's important to let folk know that, yeah, Nat is in me. I ain't gonna let him out right now. But you push me. Okay? That is it. That is it. Okay? You have your Malcolm, you have your Martin. Okay? Don't be Martin when you should be Malcolm, and don't be Malcolm when you should be Martin. It's the balance that allows us to navigate our life and take care of our children, and take care of our family. But I know the personalities in me. And see, again, I own them. I don't know about them other 2, but I know the 14. I'm still trying to work out those other 2. But they must be there. The limbic system of the brain is another area that we study. Here's where you do the amygdala and the hippocampus of the brain. Here's a closer look at the various parts of the brain. See, they didn't teach us this in school. And they didn't teach us this way. And to me, as I look back on my life, I taught this to my 6th grade class in science. I wanted Kwame to understand why he acted the way he acted.
Was the pineal gland too much for that?
Say that again?
Was the pineal gland too much for that in 6th grade?
No, not at all. Because I would just go into feelings. I would go into spirituality, because so many of them go to church. And I could do it in relationship to their experiences, Pentecostal or Christian, Baptist, Muslim. You can talk about religion, you can't proselytize. This is another thing. They say you can't teach religion. That's not true. You can teach religion in social studies. You can't proselytize, like make them want to be whatever religion you are, or trying to convince them that they should be the way you think. You can't do that. But it's important, as part of social studies, to be able to explain to children the various religions and what they believe in. See, I taught spirituality in science class, but they never do it, because I taught it as energy. And I taught Shabaka stuff. You can't do that, you know.
That's science.
And you use the words. See, there's a way, like for instance, when I go into a church and I'm speaking to the congregation, I know that if I use the word evolution, there are going to be ripples in the church. But if I use the term life science, everybody sits there and listens. Because evolution is like a search engine word, that when you kick it, it creates images in the mind. But if you change your vocabulary to talk to the community for where they are at that point in life, and to understand the role that religion has played, particularly Christianity. I have such a respect. Spirituality before religions, I do not put down any religions at all. First of all, I know through Shabbat Stone is a combination of the Old Testament and the New Testament. That's where they got the Old Testament and the New Testament from. So I don't have a problem with the scriptures. I don't have a problem with the religions. I have a problem with the European interpretations of the religions. I can show you Genesis on the walls of Egypt. I can show you Genesis in Yoruba tradition, Oshun. I can show you everything that's in Islam, particularly Sufism. I can show you the surahs in the pyramid text. That's where they got it from. I don't have a problem with the scripture. I have a problem with the interpretations of the scripture. I can show you the Eucharistic feast. I grew up Roman Catholic, where the priest will raise up and he'll change this wafer into the body of Jesus Christ, and he'll take water and wine. You know why they use water and wine? Because wine is the earthly spirit and water is the heavenly spirit. So when you combine heaven and earth, you create an entity of both divinity and earth. This is what made Christ a man and God at the same time, was the water and the wine. And he does it over an altar. He does all this over a rectangular altar. Now I'm going to take you into the pyramid text of Unas, the last pharaoh of the 5th dynasty, and I'm going to show you in Utterance 274 and 275. I believe those are the numbers. I'm going to show you where Unas transforms himself into a bull and eats the body of the gods and drinks their blood. Not literally. That was a metaphor for you all that you eat. And upon death and in life, if you eat of divinity, you become divine. It wasn't meant to be literal. That's a child's story. That's like actually looking for the beanstalk with Jack. Or the 7 dwarfs, who, by the way, were the 12 people. That's a story for another day. But because Cinder was black. Cinder from fireplace is black.
So the Old Testament and New Testament is properly understood. There's no conflict whatsoever with science.
None whatsoever.
No.
Noah and the flood, that's none. I can show you Cain and Abel, Satan and Asar. The New Testament is Heru, the resurrection of the Father. In the Old Testament, Moses, remember Moses, Nez means son of. Moses, they promised, because you know in the story, people of Jewish faith that followed Moses, and it couldn't have been Jewish because there was no letter J at the time in the language. But be that as it may, okay, with respect to people's faith system, let's just go along with the story for a moment. They tell you, but they don't tell you this. They don't tell you that the last time Moses came up out the mountains, his followers assassinated him. And in their shame, they promised that there would be the coming of the second Messiah. And so when Jesus Christ came, that's who they said was the second Messiah. That's the Shabbat story. That's our story. It's the interpretation of the children taking the place of the parents. It's a beautiful story. That's another disappointment I have. The stories that we know of that are metaphors are beautiful ways of living. Because not only is it about death, but it's about life. It's not about how to prepare yourself when you die to go to heaven. It's about how to prepare yourself in life, how to dine and be part of the divine life. And so when you study the text of our ancestors, you're telling a story about death, but you're also telling a story about life. Because the higher levels of consciousness is like going into heaven or a menta. Amen is hidden, ta means land, the hidden land. Well, in your brain, that's the hidden land. And this is why you got to study the brain. Because the Kybalion, the first law of the Kybalion is that the universe is mental. The first three virtues in Kush Kemet and also in Yoruba, control of your thoughts, control of your words, control of your deeds. And all of them are words. Because your thoughts are silent words, your words are communicating words, and your deeds are action words. The word is up. That's why we say to each other, word. That's why we say it. It's true. Okay, now what I do here, and then we can sort of kind of close it out for questions and answers. When people say, how do you teach melanin to children? I taught melanin to children first through astronomy and the sun. I have a DVD on the sun and melanin. You teach astronomy to children. You teach them about the sun, the power of the sun. I'll tell you a story about Dr. Richard King. I first met Dr. Richard King probably sometime in the early 80s, First World Alliance, first time. And his conversation was on melanin. And I remember that I had heard Dr. Frances Cress-Welsing talking about melanin in the 70s, but it never caught her Cress theory. It didn't catch. I was now a kindergarten teacher, and I went to First World Alliance. Richard King was doing a presentation on melanin. He didn't see me because I was in the back, but he probably saw people up front. And you could see that folk were confused. They had never heard about melanin before. He said, okay, brothers and sisters, here's the thing. If you can understand plant photosynthesis, you can understand human photosynthesis. Because chlorophyll is to the plant as melanin is to the human. He said the chloroplast is a chlorophyllin cell, like the melanocyte is the melanin cell. Now, when I heard him say that, that clicked a bell with me because I used to have classes where we taught like photosynthesis to kindergarten children. You know, we get the milk carton, put dirt in there, put seed in there, let it grow. That was our science class. So all of a sudden I began to say, well, wait a minute. That's a great connection. So what I did is I went back to my kindergarten class and I developed a class on plant photosynthesis. And every time I would make some kind of point in plant photosynthesis, I would say, okay, I'm going to remember that when I start looking at melanin. And so what began to happen is I had bought Black Dot 1 and Black Dot 2. These were two Xerox copies of two chapters in his book, The African Origins of Biological Psychiatry. Before he ever published that book, he had done two Xerox copies. I bought them. And after I did my segment on photosynthesis, then I went into melanin. And I started to make the correlation. And so the way in which I'm writing my next book, Carbon Before Melanin, is the same way I taught it in the classroom. When Dr. Sabi, and I'm dedicating part of the book to Dr. Sabi, who used to always say, you always talk about melanin, you've got to talk about carbon. The name of the book is Carbon Before Melanin. And what I do is I take you up into the heavens and I have you look at nanodiamonds. I have you look at the blackness of the universe. From astronomy, I then take you down and we do a whole piece on botany and plant photosynthesis and the role that botany plays. When you look at a leaf, there's a segment, there's a webinar I have where you take a leaf and you take the human skin, the epidermis and the dermis to the leaf, and they're side by side. You make a comparison. There's a direct correlation between chlorophyll in the plant melanin in the skin. But not only that, there's a direct relationship between the creation of chlorophyll and carbon and the creation of melanin and carbon. And so therefore there becomes that relationship between the skin, and then from botany, I then take you into biology, and we start with the skin. And we start talking about skin melanin. From skin melanin, I take you to neuromelanin in the brain, and then I take you to the various parts of the human body where melanin makes your heart beat, makes your blood circulate, makes your lung breathe, make your reproductive systems reproduce, makes your excretory system purge liquids and solids. We can teach this to our children. And this was a presentation I did with an organization outside of Atlanta that's called Kinder Gardens, where they have a program for children. They have a school for children in Atlanta that they are on farms. And their school is on farms. And I did this presentation, and I'll just go through the slides real quick just so you can see. You teach about the sun, okay? Learning about the sun. Learn about the parts of the sun with the children. This is a children's worksheet, okay? Nothing heavy. I'm not trying to get heavy. Particularly with a lot of the adults I'm talking to, you may be on the same level that the children are on as it relates to knowledge and wisdom, not in terms of sophistication. Our star, more information about the sun. Then this is a worksheet I created about the sun. Okay, the first level astronomy is the sun. This is what we teach our children. Here's the parts of the sun. Very simple, straightforward, understanding the parts of the sun. Photosphere, chromosphere, corona, radiative zone, the core. Now we go into botany and photosynthesis. See, family, I want us to understand this exists. This is not what I'd like to do. This is something that I've done. This is something I've done from the early days with Dr. Richard King, taking all of his work and bringing it into my classroom, my first grade class, my second grade class. And according to what class I was teaching was how deep I got into the conversation, and it all revolved around vocabulary. Vocabulary is the key when you're teaching children. I always try to keep my own biological children, even my own children, if I had a second grade class, I wanted them to have a third grade vocabulary. So we used to do not only second grade vocabulary, but third grade vocabulary, because one of the ways you can pass the test is you may not know the answer, but if you know what the word means, you can answer the question. Standardized test is a joke. And so we go into the parts of the leaf. We talk about the leaf, the role of the minerals and the sunlight. It's all here, family. Now this would be a kindergarten worksheet, first grade. Very simple. Root, stem, leaf, flower, and dotted line where they can draw the words. Now we go into the skin. Now I'm showing you a side view of the epidermis and the dermis. And I'm showing you where melanin is in the skin. Here we do a poem through language arts, Langston Hughes, Harlem Sweeties. If you remember that poem, he talks about all the different complexions of sisters in Harlem. From vanilla to cherry, to black cherry, to pomegranate, you know, he goes through all of that. And so through language arts, we talk about the different complexions and the role that melanin plays in those various parts. Here I'm showing you the different types. Type 1 through type 6. This is a melanocyte. This is a melanosome, and this is melanin in the melanosome that's in the melanocyte. In Europeans, this is what it looked like. In black folk, that's what it looked like. That's the difference when you get into the science. Here I'm making a comparison. Sunlight and the skin. And teach to the hippocampus. Can you remember the one teacher who had the most impact on your life? That's the question I asked you earlier. So,
Yes.
that's what the children are teaching. This is what the children are asking us. Teach us the truth so we can change things. And as I look at that first picture, and I can't tell you how many times I've been in classrooms with faces looking at me like that. Just teach us the truth, man. And stand up with dignity and pride. And don't be afraid.
Is Q&A time?
All right, we're
Teach
gonna,
it that students remember in 30 years.
okay, we're gonna,
We done.
Give Professor Kaba a good hand. Okay, hold on. We're gonna have 3 questions, because I don't know if the Zoom is gonna go off at 10:30. If it stays on, we good. If it goes off at 10:30, that's what is gonna happen. Now, we'll let the Zoom audience do the first question from the Zoom. Anybody from Zoom got a question? Okay. Second question is from the floor. Anybody from the floor have a question?
Dr. Kaba, just wanted to point out, when you mentioned earlier that you have to use key words when you're teaching in a church, when you use the word evolution.
Yes.
The reason why a church is not very receiving when you use the term evolution is because that's the sticking point with respect to man and man coming from apes, which the church is not in a position to accept at this time. So this is why you have to be a wordsmith
Yes.
and use other words that are a little more comfortable and palatable, because the church is not willing to accept that man and ape is a connection.
Yes.
They believe God made man, and even though there are similarities, which I'm sure everybody can readily notice, phenotypically. But in terms of that connection, the church is not going to accept it.
And the science of it is that bone for bone, muscle and muscle, organ for organ, and gland for gland. Everything that's in a human is in the same place in a gorilla or a ape. There's only one faction Dr. Richard King says is the difference between an ape and a human. That's in the locus coeruleus. The locus coeruleus is in the brainstem. And these are known as the 12 pigmented sites. Substantia nigra is another, locus coeruleus is another. And the locus coeruleus is a Sanskrit Greek word that means black dot. That's where Dr. King got the word black dot from. Locus coeruleus. And the only difference is that there is more melanation, there's more melanin in the locus coeruleus of a human than in a gorilla. And that's about the only difference between the two right now. And that's even being looked upon. And, there's a lot of things that gorillas are doing now that they weren't doing before. And, gorillas be looking at us and saying, you can make fun of me all you want to, but y'all ain't in good shape yourselves. Y'all don't even know what to eat, because you throw me a Big Mac up in here. I may touch the lettuce, but I'm throwing everything back at you. So, it's interesting, and I understand why. But the fact of the matter is that the ape and the gorilla same. That the ape and the human have a common ancestor known as Ramapithecus. And Ramapithecus at one time was up in the tree. There were no apes and there were no humans. Ramapithecus was up there. But for whatever reason, some of the Ramapithecus, either being kicked out of the tree or coming down out of the tree, walking on the land, had to form a new way of living. And in so doing, they had a new way of thinking. And in having a new way of thinking, they began to move across and do different things. And the ones that fell or came down on the ground became known and went through a process of what we call today hominids. And the ones that remained in the tree are called pongids. The pongids are the apes and the great apes and things like that. But the reality of it is that we have a common ancestor. We did not evolve from the ape. That's not true. But we have a common ancestor. And some of the Ramapithecus came down on the ground, others remained in the tree. Arboreal life, and it was only by chance during the Miocene age that we flourished, because at this time, the trees was plentiful. And the gorillas and the apes and all they was just living the life. And the humans were struggling. But then all of a sudden, check this out, fam. There was a global warming. And the global warming tore down all the trees. And what was an advantage in the arboreal life for the Panjits became a detriment, and it became an advantage for the hominids. And out of that grew the hominid, then becoming Australopithecus robustus, the robust human. And then from robust, it became slender through its life system, started losing hair, and it became Australopithecus gracile. I'm using the work of Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, Civilization of Barbarism. From Australopithecus gracile, what began to happen is that the big toe began to structure itself so that what the gorillas in the tree, they have 100% mobility. They can use their feet and their hands for the same thing. I mean, they can just fly through the trees, right? But when that Ramapithecus came down on the ground, that opposable big toe, they started stepping on it. So they kept pushing it to the side so that they wouldn't step on it, and pretty soon nature had it grow so that the big toe was beside the foot. Okay? What that did, brother, is that it created 50% mobility, 50% stability. It freed up the hands, and the hands started to make tools. Homo habilis. And then Homo habilis began to stand erect. What started when they stood erect was the sunlight could come and hit the pineal gland, and it could activate the frontal part of the brain. But at the same time, it freed up the cataracts in the legs, interruptions. Because when you're down this way, you have interruptions in your liquid system. Your knees are bent, your body is bent over, your head, and here you have a foramen magnum, which is an opening.
And you think better when your head is up.
That is right. And it gave way for the cerebrospinal fluid. It's like if you had a hose and you bent it, the water would not come out as directly as if you straightened it up. When we straightened up, and also to add to what you're saying, Brother Michael, instead of always being like this, our thought process is always in the present.
That's right.
But when we stood up, we looked into the future. And then we started thinking about the future, where we were going. So mentally, physically, spiritually, and soulfully, Homo erectus then brought in Homo sapiens, thinking human. And then when we started thinking, we started creative thinking, and that became Homo sapiens sapient. And I'm working on another webinar that I'm saying to us, as an African people, if we continue to develop the way we're developing, we're going to move from Homo sapiens sapiens to Homo perfectus, or super sapiens. Which means that we're going to take this thinking process to a whole nother level. And in all honesty, I think that's why they enslaved us. I think this was Bob Marley says, how long shall they kill our prophets while we stand aside and look? Some say it's just a part of it, we have to fulfill the book. I think that what we've been through, we knew heaven. So we got the DNA of the period business. Okay? But somewhere along the line, the Creator said, that's not good enough. You know heaven, but you don't know hell. You can think about what hell is, but you don't know hell. So I'm going to take a group of y'all out, and I'm going to place you in hell. And so then we became the plantation dwellers. We know hell. We've lived in hell, and we met the devil. So we've got the DNA of the pyramid builders, we've got the DNA of the plantation dwellers. But the Creator said, that's not good enough, we're going to put you in limbo, purgatory. You ain't ready yet. So they placed us in the projects, where I grew up. And we're going to let you settle there for a while, so that you can attend First World Alliance, African Echoes. And for those of you who are smart enough, we're going to send you to UAM, and we're going to send you to the Dr. William Mackey Study Group.
Yes, sir.
So you can come and learn about how great you are. And then you'll be on your way to the promised land.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Dr. King was correct. We have difficult days, but we as a people are going to make it to the promised land. All we're going to do is keep on keeping on. realizing it ain't over till when. It's not about if, it's when. It's not about who, it's us. Look at us, look at what we've done. This is a miracle. At one time, if there was more than 3 of us, some of them had to be in our presence. You see them coming up in your neighborhood, right? When I was coming here, I used to come down here. And I'm coming down here, I'm coming down Atlantic Avenue, and I come on, they got they're pushing their strollers and their dogs, but you know they're all young. Do you know who that is? See, why would they not want to move into a European neighborhood? Why are they moving into ours? Because ain't nobody in their neighborhood moving out. Do you know who this is? Who's moving into your neighborhood? People from Idaho
Right.
and Ohio.
Right.
Research an article written June 20th, I think it was 20th, 2018. But just Google Sabrina Tavernise, Sabrina Tavernise, where she's telling you back then that of the 50 states, 26 states, there are more Europeans dying than being born.
Mm.
If you want to go to my website, I did a 3-part series. I'm about to do the 4th part series.
Tell them your website, please.
My website is www.kabakamenet.com. KABAKAMENE.com.
Say one more time, I'm sorry.
KABA.
AABN.
No, K. Kenneth, Albert, Bernard, Alpha. KABAKAMENE.
I'm putting it in the chat, family.
I did a part on the origin and development of the Caucasoid. Because I believe that we have to understand exactly who they are and why they're doing what they're doing now. What is this thing with abortion now? They know that the only person that could produce a child of European descent is a woman of European descent. They don't care if it's rape. They don't care if granddaddy got his eye on the grandbaby 10 years old. If you get pregnant by me, you're going to have that baby. It don't make a difference under any circumstance because they know their numbers. Read the book called The Birth Dearth by Ben J. Wattenberg. Read the book The Death of the West by Pat Buchanan. And then if you want to know what's going on in Europe, read the book The Strange Death of Europe by Douglas Murray. Don't believe me. Their numbers are dwindling. They're coming into these neighborhoods because they're escaping the towns that are being closed down in Ohio and in Idaho. Their numbers is called the TFR, the total fertility rate. In order for a civilization to continue, the civilization should be producing what they call 2.6 children. Each family should be producing 2.6 children. In the European American community, they are producing 1.6. So what we're saying is that if you take 10 families, they should be producing 26 children. In reality, they're only producing 16. Their numbers are dwindling. Their numbers are up, but don't be surprised, because there were groups of Australopithecines, robustus, that didn't last. They died out. The ones that could survive became Australopithecus gracile. There were some that couldn't survive. They died out. Australopithecus gracile became Homo habilis. They were all Homo habilis couldn't survive. They died out. The same thing goes for Homo erectus, Homo sapien, and now in Homo sapiens sapien stage, there's groups of them that are dying out. Because the first thing they should have done, even the albino gorilla snowflake in Spain,
right,
would not mate with an albino female because he knew by nature that he could not be able to sustain his people. He had untold children, whole bunch of grandchildren, they were all black. The first thing that the Africans that depigmented themselves should have done when they left the mountains of the Caucasus and of the Himalayas, they should have found the biggest, blackest person that they could mate with in order to return back. But they got xenophobia, and they refused to mate with the archetype. They only mated with themselves. So let me close this point out. The people we're dealing with are not mutations. The people we're dealing with out here are mutations of mutations. And they're working themselves off
into the extinction protocol. They're dying out. And in my last presentation, I show you how they can't reproduce because of problems, thank you, brother, because of the problems in their reproductive organs. In a melanated reproductive system in a woman, the egg is magnetic. In the spermatozoon of a melanated male, the spermatozoon is electric, electromagnetism. When a man and a woman mates, the moment the woman stands up, that sperm is working against gravity. So it needs an electricity in the tail to continue its way up to the egg. So the egg, being melanated, acts as a magnet to draw the spermatozoon up in order to create the zygote. However, in them, they have weak magnetism and they have weak electricity. So they can't reproduce the way they should. Now, I'm not speaking in absolutes because you can see them having children. But I'm saying as a people, and what this virus has done, whatever we want to call it, whatever their illnesses are, they're all moving into the neighborhood. And the reason why they're doing it is because their neighborhoods are dying out. They're coming to cities, but nobody of their culture is moving out of their neighborhood, so where else can they go but in our neighborhood and push us out?
Right.
So that's what we're looking at here. That's why I say we got to keep on keeping on. See, they got to watch, but we got the time. And if we can just keep on keeping on,
You want to ask a question?
please.
Yeah. The pineal gland, what is that thing and how important is it and how do you enhance it? The pineal gland.
In your limbic system, this is the research that we've done. In your limbic system of the brain, in your third ventricle, you have three major glands. You have the optic thalami, you have the pituitary gland, and you have the pineal gland. The optic thalami is responsible for your emotional growth. O-P-T-I-C, thalami. T-H-A-L-A-M-I, thalami. Your pituitary gland is responsible for your physical growth. They have a commercial on TV now that's showing you that. They're trying to get you to buy some vitamins to make your pituitary gland grow. That's nonsense. And your pineal gland is responsible for your spiritual. And as they balance themselves out, your spiritual growth, your physical growth, and your emotional growth. So the pineal gland is responsible for your spiritual growth. And when I say your spiritual growth, I'm not so much, I'm talking about that deeper concept. Like, for instance, you could practice when you hum, there is a place in the back of your olfactory lobe that vibrates. You can feel it, it tickles, like inside your brain, you can feel it tickle. That, I did a webinar on, that's the G-spot of your spirit. Okay. Just like men and women have a physical G-spot in the root chakra, you also have a spiritual G-spot. That when you do that, you're vibrating this area. This area, our ancestors called the sacred sanctuary. When that happens, it vibrates and it taps into your pineal gland and it takes you to a level of consciousness. This is why in meditation you have that. But even like when you taste something that tastes good, what do you say? When you get a thought that makes sense, what do you say? When something ain't right, what do you say? Okay, that sound is the only sound. That's why it's the 13th letter of the alphabet with the N that follows. That the M is the only sound we make where your mouth has to be closed completely. Every other letter, A, B, C, D, Z, K, your mouth is open. When you make the sound that is why with children, the first sound they make is because that's the suckling sound.
that they make when they suckle at mother's breast, which is the first thing they do when they leave mother's body. Okay? But the M, and what you're doing with that concept, is that that is where all of your senses meet. And prior to previous announcement, you have 6 senses. You don't have 5. Sight, sound, smell, touch, hear, and think. Taste, and think. Okay? Your eyes, your ears, your tongue, your skin, your brain, and the other. The 6th one. Your sight for your eyes, smell, taste, hearing, feeling, and sound. 6, okay? And when you meditate, those 6 senses vibrate in this cerebrospinal fluid, and it takes you to a level of consciousness, but it impacts your pineal gland. And in impacting your pineal gland, it takes you to those levels of thought and idea. This is why you have the sound Om in meditation, Mama, okay? The M sounds is very important, and it's the 13th sound that comes from the alphabet.
And that's why those people rub those bowls and stuff that makes those singing bowls. They rub. Does that do the same thing like the M?
I think it has impact. Yes, it does have impact. Sounds have impact on us. Period. Okay, sound is one of the very first. Sound was one of the first senses that we had to sharpen.
Oh yeah, hear.
You know, hearing was very important. Of course, sight and all of them. But yes, whatever sounds you make is very important. You know, Gregorian chant. The resonance, exactly. And this is why music is so important to us as a people. Because music, you know, like Bob Marley said, you know, music is that one thing that when it hit, you know, it don't hurt. You know, he says that with Trenchtown Rock, I think.
Yeah, hit me with music.
Hit me with music.
Yeah.
Brutalize me with music. Because when it hit, it don't cause no pain.